And welcome, I have with me Jaran Mellerud. And Jaran, all the way from Norway. How are you, Jaran? How's it going over there?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Just wondering, how are things going over there in Norway? Is the political climate changing like it is in the rest of the world, or is it things are pretty stable over there?
It's changing. I would say changing slower than in the rest of the world. Norway is always lagging a couple of years behind the rest of the world, it feels like. But we have had a very socialist government for the last like 3, 4 years, and now it's completely changed. And it's like a right wave coming over Norway now. So it's also changing in Norway.
Yeah, there's a wave that's changing. This is a pendulum that swings one way or another, and globally, this is going on. And if you think it's going to continually go this way, it won't, because eventually it will shift back the other way. This is the way
Yes.
things work, unfortunately, or fortunately. Anyways, for people who are unfamiliar with your work, I'd like maybe you give a little background. Who is Jaran Mellerud?
So I'm a Bitcoin miner. I started out as a research analyst analyzing the Bitcoin mining industry. I have a background from energy management, studied that in university. And then eventually I met Alan Makhmetov from Kazakhstan. And he ran a mining operation in Kazakhstan. And he wanted to go more global. So I joined him in Hash Labs last year, along with a third co-founder, Marek, and we built Hash Labs. So yeah, I live in Norway, mining in many countries.
Tell me, what does Hash Labs do? Do they provide services to people that want to build out and scale up Bitcoin mining operations?
Yes, we do hosting. So if anyone wants to host some machines, we can provide that. We do hosting in several countries: Norway, Finland, Ethiopia, Indonesia also coming up now. So that's what we mainly focus on, providing hosting solutions for Bitcoin miners. And then we also do some self mining as well. We are like a long term vision is really to be a provider for the energy industry, to provide mining as a service to the energy industry, for energy companies who want to make their own operations more efficient by the use of Bitcoin mining.
So, who's typically the customer? Is it retail or is it commercial that is coming to you looking for services?
We have both retail and commercial customers. I think average size of our customer is about 30 or 40 machine per customers. We have some customers with even only one machine, and then we have some with like 1,000 machines. So it's very different.
Mm-hmm. And Kazakhstan is no longer a destination for setting up Bitcoin mining operations. I know it was at one time, but that's no longer the case.
Yeah, Kazakhstan was the second largest Bitcoin mining country in 2021. So there was a huge growth there. And that's when my co-founder, Alan Makhmetov, started the operation in Kazakhstan. He worked in Glencore in Beijing for many years and is very familiar with the commodity market. So he was get the idea to start mining Bitcoin in Kazakhstan because they have very cheap electricity there. And unfortunately, there were so many other miners who got the same idea to start mining in Kazakhstan in that time. So the market became overcrowded, and basically the electricity grid hadn't been taken proper care of during the last 20 to 30 years since the Soviet Union collapsed. But the grid operator, which is government owned, they had been kind of putting it under the rug and trying to hide the fact that the state of the grid couldn't accommodate that much demand. So on paper, it looked very good, but in reality, it was not good. And mining revealed that. So they had to, mining basically overloaded the grid in the end, and they had to get rid of the industry. So they introduced many laws and rules that made it very difficult to operate there, like taxes on electricity, also banning mining within certain times of the day. You have to buy it in a specific electricity market only for miners where there is not enough electricity. So it basically meant that mining in Kazakhstan went from being very, very lucrative to being almost not possible over the span of a few months. So, but now it's making a comeback now. It's regulated and kind of stable now. And there are some regions in Kazakhstan which actually have electricity surplus. And we see now that the industry is growing in that in these regions, and probably will continue to be a significant place for mining. But we are not mining in Kazakhstan anymore because Alan's facility, which he built, is unfortunately located in a region which doesn't really have a surplus of electricity. So that is shut down for now.
What happened to all the equipment that was there at one time? Was it just relocated to other parts of Kazakhstan where they now have excess electricity, or were they sent abroad to other jurisdictions that probably have a lot of excess electricity? Because they had a lot of hash power at one time. So I'm wondering if you know what happened to all the equipment.
Yeah, it's like probably more than 100,000 machines in Kazakhstan, probably even much more. And a lot of this equipment has been stranded in Kazakhstan because, of course, many miners, you always have the hope that things will improve next month or in 2 months. So then you just keep the facility and like hope that things will change very soon. So a lot of the equipment was just stranded there because of operators who had hope that it will change and improve. Unfortunately, it didn't really improve that much. And also some equipment was moved to Russia, like over the border to Russia. And yeah, some have been exported to other countries as well, but a lot of stranded machines there.
Now, in terms of where hash rate seems to be growing, Ethiopia and other parts of Africa seem to be growing significantly. And there's the dam that they've set up in Ethiopia that's generating a heck of a lot of electricity and excess electricity, and they're just diverting that to mine Bitcoin. I want to hear your thoughts about that project because it seems to have been getting a little bit of news within the Bitcoin mining community, but I don't think a lot of people really hear about that. So I want to hear if you could just provide some background on that, whatever you have, or your thoughts and so forth, because I find that to be a rather interesting story.
Yeah, so we were one of the first companies entering Ethiopia in the beginning of this year. So when we entered, it was not at all a story in the news. Ethiopia just started to grow. But Ethiopia is a very interesting case study for how actually a country can use Bitcoin mining for their own good. So, Ethiopia, we have to remember, it's a very big country with a very, very powerful government. It was a communistic country for many, many years, and this attitude is still within the government. So, they want to control everything, and they are very, very powerful. So, this is one thing. And since it's such a centralized government, it also means that they can form the industry according to the benefit of the whole country. And I would say that they have done that with the mining industry. So they have a lot of surplus electricity from this, it's called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is the largest hydropower plant in Africa. It has a capacity of around 8 gigawatts once it's fully built out, which is enormous. And Ethiopia is a very fast growing country. So they will have a very large growth in their electricity consumption. But this will take many years it will take many years for this consumption to increase. So during this, let's say the next 10 years, whatever, a lot of these hydropower plants would have been unutilized if it wasn't for Bitcoin mining. So they basically had two choices. Either they could export the electricity, which they actually is doing, or they could just export it by the use of Bitcoin mining, just mining inside the country. And they're utilizing a combination of that. So right now there is around 1 gigawatt of mining, and this serves as a way for them to monetize their electricity. So the national utility of Ethiopia, which is called Ethiopian Electric Power, are selling a lot of electricity to Bitcoin miners. And if it wasn't for mining, they would be 100% dependent on the neighboring countries to buy that electricity. And Ethiopia, like the build out of this dam, is very controversial. So, because it allows Ethiopia to fully control the water flow of the Nile, which of course the downstream countries don't like. So I would say for Ethiopia, mining is a very, very strategically important industry, because if they had to sell all their electricity to neighbors, maybe the downstream countries would not really like that, and they would try to encourage the neighbors to not buy that electricity, for example. So mining gives them a lot of power and is very beneficial for Ethiopia. Um, the industry in Ethiopia is mining is growing, I think, fastest in the world in Ethiopia. It's enormous growth there, and there will continue to be growth over the next few months, and then I think it will have a little bit break, because most of there will not be so much excess electricity anymore, so they have to basically not give out more electricity to the miners. Also, I can mention that there's a lot of most of the miners in Ethiopia are Chinese. So because the Chinese have been doing business in Ethiopia for like 10, 15 years, so they really much know the country. In Addis Ababa, the capital, there is even a Chinatown, and with like
Yeah.
a sign everywhere, and it's pretty cool actually. And they have like an own building, like a hotel, like a huge hotel where all the Chinese miners like to stay. So we know most of the Chinese people operating there, because Alan in our team speaks Chinese. So yeah, it's very much driven by Chinese investments, and also these providers of electrical infrastructure to the utility of Ethiopia. They're Chinese, so all these Chinese miners have the contact with them, and that's for them is very easy to buy electricity and find the properties and operate there.
You've traveled to Ethiopia or to Addis before, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been there many times. We do operate in Ethiopia also.
Okay. And in terms of then the knowledge over there, I guess with respect to Bitcoin mining and the extent in which it's being rolled out in Ethiopia, I think it's pretty much contained to the people that are involved with it, the government officials, the electrical people. I guess the general public really doesn't have an idea that their country is mining Bitcoin. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct, because Ethiopia is such a large country. It's like way over 100 million people living there. So they don't really like mining is a big industry there, but it's not like anything that gets people's attention there. And of course, you can read about it in the local news in Ethiopia as well, and more people getting interested about it. So we get from time to time requests through our contact form on our website from Ethiopians who want to start mining or who want to work for us. And yeah, we hired a few Ethiopians also, for like, for example, our lawyer is Ethiopian. He's very, very good. They have so some people are reaching out, and yeah, they understand that this can bring some benefits to the country. So I would say they're very open to it in Ethiopia compared to in Norway, for example, where I'm from.
It certainly incentivizes the energy generation, electricity generation, and expanding upon that. And that's something I want to talk about in a little bit. But I just wanted to. I have a couple more questions to do with the dam, the generation of electricity over there, and the use of it. Ultimately, they're a business. The government may not be totally a business, but they're there to maximize the profits from this endeavor. In terms of how much revenue they're able to generate in terms of per kilowatt hour, are they able to get more out of it, more dollars for mining Bitcoin right now, or for selling it abroad? I'm just wondering which of the two is more lucrative, or is it kind of just a tough question to answer?
It's actually a very easy question to answer. They get much more from Bitcoin miners. So the electricity tariff for Bitcoin miners is like, let's say, between 3 and 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And when they sell the electricity to the neighboring countries, I can't remember the exact number,
Mm-hmm.
but it is at a significantly lower price than what they get from selling it to Bitcoin miners. And keep in mind also, when they sell electricity to neighbors, they have to build out so large transmission lines over hundreds of kilometers, and that's also very, very expensive. So Bitcoin miners can just connect directly to the substation. They don't have to build out these transmission lines, and they buy the electricity at a higher price.
That's I find that fascinating. I think that's rather bullish for the Bitcoin mining operation over there, and maybe others similar to that around the world. Because I look at right now, we just had the halving less than a year ago, so the rewards are much less. But also, if you look at the subsidy that like what we're getting, um, like how much people are paying for transactions. Like look at like the last bunch of blocks. I haven't checked in a day or two, but we got to as low as 1 sat per VByte. So there's really not much that people are. So in terms of like the incentive to mine Bitcoin, if they're making more money mining Bitcoin in this environment than they are selling electricity, I think that's for them and maybe others. It's rather bullish because in terms of how much people are going to start paying as the block space becomes more scarce in the future, it should go up. So
Yeah, I
I'm
think
looking
so
at this.
too. And of course, like in the future, Ethiopia will have a tremendous economic growth, and also the neighboring countries. So then they might actually be able to sell the electricity at a higher price than
Uh-huh.
Bitcoin miners pay. But right now, it's quite beneficial to sell to the Bitcoin miners.
So the way you're envisioning it, it's kind of a stopgap measure. It just gives them the ability to generate the electricity, to sell it right now at a decent price, and once the demand ramps up, then they could scale back what they're directing to Bitcoin mining. So it just basically it's a stopgap measure until they reach the total 8 gigawatts in terms of capacity and consumption. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. Probably Ethiopia will have a very large growth in their electricity production capacity over the next, let's say, 20 years, because there is a huge untapped potential of hydropower that is still not be developed yet. And so even if the consumption grows, like internal consumption grows to like the capacity right now, there will still be even more production capacity in the future. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there will be a function for Bitcoin mining for many years in Ethiopia. Um, but yeah, it's like always, because hydropower plants, they need to be built out in like almost from 0 to 100%. So, and it takes so long time to build them. So you will have to have some kind of consumption that can monetize this, always this capacity before the country internal consumption increases towards that.
Are there any other projects globally that is similar to this that is being rolled out or at least thought about? Because I don't hear of anything, but you have your finger on the pulse more so than I do. So maybe you might have some insight into this.
I would say that Ethiopia is, yeah, there is one more, I think. So there is Bhutan. They're also
Yes.
like thinking the same way like Ethiopia doing. And they're using Bitcoin mining to monetize their electricity in the same way, hydropower also. But the difference is that in Bhutan, the government is actually, I think they're actually mining themselves. But in Ethiopia, from what I know, the government is not directly mining. They're just selling the electricity to the miners. So that's the
Right.
difference.
Right. Yeah, it's an investment firm of of the Bhutan government that's mining Bitcoin. And from what I remember from that, they have excess electricity during certain times of the year, and they have a deficit of electricity other times of the year because it is being there's hydro dams over there, so the water flow sometimes it enables them to generate more or less or whatever. I think that's what it is. So they're not mining all year round. It's just based on whenever there's an excess amount of electricity being generated. So I'm taking it that the Bhutan government, they never reached out to you for any advice or any
No, no, unfortunately not. They're working with Bitdeer, which is a very large company, publicly traded, and it's even larger than Hash Labs. And I think they're happy to work with them.
How about in Scandinavia? Is there any growth over there in terms of how Bitcoin mining operations? I know that gosh, I forget the company name. It's one in Canada. Oh man, I totally forget the name. They used to mine a little bit of ETH as well, besides Bitcoin. They're using the excess heat to heat businesses and homes in some Scandinavian countries. Gosh, it's Hive. That's the country.
Yeah,
That's the company.
hi. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what's going on in Scandinavia with respect to Bitcoin mining? How's the business model over there working? And is it people picking it up, people using it? Like, just curious.
Yeah, first of all, Scandinavia has been one of the longest standing Bitcoin mining countries in the world. So in Scandinavia, people started mining Bitcoin in like 2015, 2016, and it's been going on since then. And that's a very long time in mining, because many countries, they just have mining for a few years and then it stops, like Kazakhstan, for example. But Nordic is a very stable region in the world. And I would say that there hasn't been a lot of growth in Norway and Sweden and Finland, Iceland the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very stable. So, like for example, in Norway, I can tell about the benefits of mining in Norway and the disadvantages. So I'm Norwegian. We also mine in Norway. First of all, Norway has the perfect climate for mining, probably a very similar climate to Canada, like especially the coastal regions of Canada. So very cold winters and very mild summers, and we have a lot of hydropower in Norway. So hydropower is completely stranded in the north. No one else can actually use this hydropower, and the government. This is a disadvantage. The government has been very anti-mining the last few years. They even tried to ban it in 2022, but they failed. And now they're trying again to ban it, and I'm really sure that they will fail again. But keep in mind that this is a very socialist government, and the next government will be a very right-wing government. So I think it will be a little bit more friendly towards mining, and also the stability of Norway is an advantage, because it's kind of opposite of Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a very centralized large government, just like Norway. But in Ethiopia, the government can decide whatever they want to do. They can change the rules in a few weeks. In Norway, they can't do like that. So even if the government doesn't like mining, miners can still mine in Norway. There is nothing they really can do about it. So that's a big advantage. And there is a large demand for heat in Norway because it's so cold here. So we are trying to help out to heat some buildings and homes in Norway. So we will launch a project in February which will heat 3 commercial buildings in the north of Norway. And so this is the future of mining in the Nordics. It's really heat reuse. And then Finland, we also mine in Finland. There we have a heat reuse project that utilizes hydro-cooled machines to heat a city of 15,000 people. So this is a mining operation, like one container that is basically connected to a district heating system, providing the hot water from the machines into the system, which is again pumped into the city. And this is what is interesting about Finland, is that since Finland is in the EU, we see that the EU is actually incentivizing Bitcoin mining, because the district heating plants are being pushed by the EU to reduce their consumption of biomass and natural gas that is imported from Russia. And
This is
the
awesome.
only way they can do that is by utilizing the heat from Bitcoin mining. So
this is incredible.
so actually, the EU is incentivizing mining in Europe right now, but I don't think they even know that they are doing that.
Well, given their stance on Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, recently they put in some new rules, MiCA rules into place, or it seems like there's always resistance from the EU government. So to see that somehow in one way, shape, or another that they're incentivizing this, I find it to be fascinating and actually kind of comical in a way. And with respect to like the heat generation, and so Hash Labs is directly involved with providing heat for businesses, residential, commercial, whatever, that want to use that to heat their location. So Hash Lab is directly involved in that. Is that correct?
Yes, we're providing heat in Finland and soon in Norway.
Got it. And in terms of then government resistance with respect to that, I you were mentioning that there was a time when in Norway they were anti-mining. What was the rationale for that?
Yeah,
What did they use to say why we don't like Bitcoin mining?
the rationale is always changing. So first it was basically first it was that Bitcoin mining is a dirty industry, and then they understood that this rationale is stupid because in Norway there is like 100% renewable energy, and Bitcoin mining is not like more dirty than other industries. So they understood that this was stupid and they can't use that rationale. So then they switched to that there is not enough energy in northern Norway. But that rationale also didn't really work because everyone knows that there is like more than enough energy in northern Norway. That there is a market for electricity and the price is very low. So then they moved on to the third rationale, which is had a little bit more substance, and that is that we need to build all these new green industries in the future, and they will need electricity. So we should not let the miners take that electricity from all these new green industries. And I think that was really what why they didn't like mining in the first place, is because this green transition, which was kind of on the peak in 2020, 2021. Part of that green transition in Europe was that Europe should be self-sufficient with battery production, green steel, like they have some concept called green steel in Europe, and hydrogen, all these new things, and that should support this green transition. So the idea was that this would be produced in the north of Norway, north of Sweden, utilizing all this renewable hydropower. The problem was that the miners are so flexible, so quick, so they managed to always get in front of these big projects in the line of electricity. So that was a big problem for them. And I think this is just speculation from my side, but I think that they lobbied the government to basically try to ban mining and make life harder for miners because they're competing with them for electricity. And it hasn't really worked for them so far. Like mining is still feasible in Norway. No one can stop miners in Norway. And now we're seeing all these green projects, they're failing one after the other. They're falling like dominoes. So, for example, in close to where I'm from in northern Norway, there was like planned one of the largest battery factories in the world that completely failed. Like they said that they were going to create like 5,000 jobs. In the end, it was like 50 jobs created, and they will even disappear in the next few months as the project get removed. And then in northern Sweden, they also had some similar project, which was even worse, some green steel project. And they even needed to like import this steel from China or something like that because they have the ability to produce it there. So all these projects are failing, and that means that there is not really a reason for the government to be anti-mining anymore, because who else are going to use that electricity? Like the green projects that failing, despite all these subsidies they got of billions of dollars, even they fail and they can't operate there. So there is no alternative users of the electricity in the north of Scandinavia. Like no industries want to be there because it's just like these countries are kind of difficult to operate in. You have very high salaries, so all industries would rather be in China, and and it's remote. It's you can't even build like AI data centers there because there is not enough redundancy. So mining is the only thing you can do with electricity in the north. So I think the future is very bright because of that fact.
I think that and you didn't really to mention the word, but the stranded energy for that. You mentioned it earlier, but I think that is one of the biggest case uses for Bitcoin, in that there's energy that just there's no need to there's no demand for it, and it is being generated. So what is the option right now until there's going to be demand in the future? It's going to be Bitcoin mining. It's a perfect stopgap measure. It could be permanent, but at least at the very least, it enables the ability to continue generating electricity and use it and to monetize electricity. So that's the biggest thing. But it's not just stranded energy, like say in northern Norway, but it's also other parts of the world, like Russia, the Middle East, and so forth. It seems like there's going to be, if there hasn't already been, a lot of Bitcoin mining operations being set up in those parts of the world. We hear about Russia, a lot of mining that's being set up over there, but in the Middle East, not so much. We don't hear a lot about it, but I think some of it, and this is just my opinion, is being done under the table. Like, it's not being reported. There's no need to report it. I want to know if you have any thoughts about the Middle East and their role in Bitcoin mining moving forward.
Yeah, and that's I think your observation is correct that there is more mining there than what people think, and because these countries in the Middle East are extremely centralized governments, and they don't really like they can do whatever they want. They don't have to report anything. So
Mm-hmm.
there is couple of operations in the UAE where they have announced everything because that's a product that is a joint venture with Marathon, which is publicly traded. So they kind of have to announce everything publicly. But in the UAE, I think publicly there is like 400 megawatt of mining, maybe a little bit more. And then Saudi Arabia, interestingly, no one seems to know about any mining going on there. But I think there has to be some mining there. Like Saudi Arabia is like the fourth biggest energy producing country in the world. So it would be really strange if there is not any mining going on there, for example. So, so yeah, these countries probably are more mining than people think. But again, there is very difficult to operate there because of the heat, and this is a big disadvantage of mining there. So in most countries, you can get away with mining, even in places which are a little bit hot, like Texas. You can kind of get away with it, but in Saudi Arabia and UAE, there is like the hottest places in the world, which makes it very difficult.
It's going to encourage more innovation in the Bitcoin mining sphere in terms of having the chips operate in a hotter environment or cool themselves faster in one way, shape, or another. So it's just going to encourage more innovation. That's the way I look at it, because there's a need, and if there's a need, that's got to be filled somehow. And well, let's see how the people at Bitmain and so forth decide to build things out and put money in R&D to solve this problem. And I just want to just shift over to another topic. Do you follow a lot of the publicly traded miners out there, or are you just not really much of a follower of them in total?
I did before, but not the last year.
Okay. I'd love to know. I mean, I know you're about a year off since really following them. I'd love to know your thoughts about what's the future of those publicly traded miners, because I kind of look at them and I see that it's going to be hard for them to compete, given the fact that a lot of them are just plugging into the grid. They're not generating their own electricity, so to speak. And the Bitcoin miners, the companies that are involved with Bitcoin mining, the ones that do that generate their own electricity, or are able to tap into something that's stranded, those are the ones that I think that are going to succeed moving forward. And these publicly ones, for the most part, I think that I don't see much of a future for them in the long term. I want to hear like your thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, I agree. I also don't really see a big future for them. Probably some of them will survive and do very well, but I think like now it's like 25 or something of them, which is a lot. The industry is not that big, so it's a lot with 25 companies. Probably there will be even more in the next bull market, but I think over the long term, definitely most of them will not do very well. You can compare it to the gold mining industry, because in gold mining, like gold mining is huge in Canada, I think, and you
Mhm.
have so many publicly traded gold mining companies, but most of them have not done very well over the last like 10, 20 years. There is only a few that do very well, and then the rest is kind of just going sideways or actually decreasing. And I think the same will happen to Bitcoin mining companies once the industry stabilizes. And there is the main reason for that is that the publicly traded Bitcoin miners, they're really good at only one thing, and that's raising capital. Like that's their specialty. And in Bitcoin mining, you have to have other specialities in order to do well in the long term. Like you have to be a good operator, get access to very cheap electricity, and just producing the Bitcoin at the lowest possible price and get the best return on capital as possible. And for example, let's say that we provide hosting at 7 cents per kilowatt hour, and then we have a publicly traded Bitcoin miner. If you go into their financial statements, you can divide all their costs by the amount of kilowatt hours they consumed in a given quarter, and then you can estimate their cost per kilowatt hour of all the expenses. And most of them have way higher cost base than 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So if we are able to provide hosting at 7 cents per kilowatt hour and actually make some profit doing that,
Mhm.
then it means that we are actually more efficient than most of the public companies, which is kind of strange since we are a much smaller company. And this goes to like most companies in the industry, like hosting in America, wherever, Canada, like let's say 7 cent is the average price. And like most public miners, if they were to offer hosting at 7 cent, they would lose money basically. And this is mostly because they have very large administrative expenses like salaries and yeah, stock compensation, all that stuff. And yeah, some of them don't really even have that cheap energy. So
I think even CleanSpark reported last year, and I could be wrong if it was them, they purchased a private jet. And
yeah,
I thought that, and if I'm wrong if it was CleanSpark, my apologies, but it was one of those publicly traded companies. I thought it was rather odd that they would purchase a private jet because why would they need it? I don't know. It seems like they're living the good life and they're just taking advantage of all the perks that come along with being publicly traded, or raising capital, as you say, is one of their
yeah.
so
So and also like now it seems like they like at least people who invest in these stocks, I think they understand the game now, and like they understand that, but they're not in it for the long term, most of
yeah.
them. They just want to ride the next bull market, and probably then they will try to sell everything.
That's the game, yeah. Uh, I mean, there's one last thing I want to talk about, and it's an ebook that you just recently published. I think it came out in November, and it's Bitcoin Mining Secrets is the name of the book. I want to hear more about it. I want to hear you talk about it because I'm
Yeah.
curious about it.
Yeah, and that's a book that I wrote, and it's really dedicated to people who want to learn. Like it's dedicated to beginners, but also like intermediates who want to learn about like the most important things they need to know in order to mine Bitcoin. And so this book is not like explaining like technically what Bitcoin mining is. How do you like? It's a this complex mathematical thing. It's not taking that into the explanation, and only like giving practical knowledge that you really need to know in order to successfully mine Bitcoin.
Mhm.
um, it's not really not really about like the technical aspects of running an operation. It's more about the economical aspect. Like, how do you determine which miner is the best you can buy? Like, which gives you the best return on your investment? What should you do? Should you start a self-mining operation, or should you start a hosting operation, like hosted miners? Like, how do you know which electricity price you can pay? Like simple ways to answer these questions that are the most important.
What's this? How many pages is the ebook?
It's like, I think 34 pages or something like that.
So pretty brief. In terms of the target audience, who you're trying to reach with that book?
We're trying to reach, I would say, all beginners and also intermediates.
And will there be periodic updates? Because if you're providing update information as what's the best right now, in the future as things progress, because the Bitcoin mining industry, it's a dynamic one where you have new chips, new rigs. Just are you going to be updating that book periodically, or is it are you just too busy to do that? Because
I think it has to be updated once per year.
got it. That's awesome. Now, just one final question. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on something like this? This is a BitAxe, and I have one just running away. I mean, I know you deal in a very large scale, but I want to hear your thoughts about something like small scale that I'm just running here doing solo mining with a BitAxe and trying to win a lottery ticket here. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on this guy?
I think it's a very nice way to learn about mining and because you have to set up the mining pool. Like, you have to like, you can see the hash rate going, and it's kind of cool, and you can learn a lot about mining by doing that. So I really like that.
It's a cool little device, and anybody out there who wants to get one and is thinking that they'll make money on it, no, it's not possible. It's simply, in my opinion, it's best just to go solo mining, go for the try winning the rewards all yourself, and good luck. You probably never get it even in 100,000 years, but who knows? You might be one of the lucky ones. Somebody last year, one BitAxe user was able to solve the block and build a block last year, and that was pretty cool. Got a lot of publicity for BitAxes all around the world, but that's aside the point. Yeah, Jaran, any final words before we wrap this one up? Any last thing you want to talk about before we call this one quits?
I would say, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's second time for me. I really appreciate it. And another point is, if someone wants to reach out to me, please do. You can find me on Twitter, and also through our website, hashlabs.io. We have a contact form. We provide hosting solutions if you are interested in starting to mine Bitcoin. And if you have any questions for me, my inbox is open.
Awesome. And I'll be putting all the links in the show notes below. So if anybody wants to go to it, it's just easily accessible. Just click away you go. Jaran Mellerud, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a pleasure. So yeah, with that, take care. We'll be back on this again on Monday. So take care.